I made a video a couple of hours ago when I was talking about the various distracting effects that happen when video, when the content, the verbal or ideational content of a video is accompanied by images, as of course always is. And I was particularly talking about two things: the distraction from the intellectual content, possibly momentary distraction from the intellectual content that having a pair of boobs on screen can affect, and the other kind of distraction that happens when the video is presented authoritatively in a certain kind of way, which distracts critical faculties. You seem to think you understand it, but actually you don't. Your critical discriminatory faculties are being distracted. And obviously I'm just kind of making this stuff up, so I'm trying to think of a set of ideas that might support that or might be interesting to put alongside that. And the thing I've thought about just now is to do with a study I read about in Scientific American, I think it was, maybe a year and a half ago or something like that. And it was about saccading the eye movements. It was fascinating because, of course, we all, our eyes all saccade all the time. They're always in motion. We're not really aware of that. They don't feel like they're flickering around, but they are. And what this particular study did was to it was looking at the relationship between saccading eye movements and desire. So the experimental setup was that the subject would be put in front of an image, and these were the control subjects I did it with first. So a control subject would put in front of an image, a picture of a person or a picture of an image, a landscape, something like that, and just asked to look at it for a certain period of time, let's say a minute. And all the time they were looking, their eye movements were being tracked. So all the little saccading movements of their eyes are being tracked. So you ended up with a map of where they'd looked on the image, and you could see what proportion of the time they'd spent looking at one part of an image as compared to another, the top as opposed to the bottom, the left as opposed to the right, those kind of things. And they did this over and over again with a whole series of different subjects. And from that gained some kind of metric about, what proportion of the time, in general, people spent looking at different parts of this image. I guess as an average. Then they repeated the same thing again, but this time they put something in the room with the experiment that would be attractive. So, for example, if this experiment was carried out late in the morning, there'd be a plate of sandwiches somewhere in the room, and this plate of sandwiches would be either to the left of the subject taking the test, or to the right. But it wasn't mentioned, it wasn't referred to. And the experiment was repeated, so again the subject would be sat in front of an image, asked to look at the image for a minute, eye movements tracked, repeated across a series of subjects. The proportions of where they looked in the image averaged, so you get another metric out of that. And what they find, of course, as you might expect by now, is that when the sandwiches, the desirable object, was placed in the room to the right of the image, there was a tendency for the subject's saccading patterns to favour the right, so there's a higher proportion of time spent looking to the right of the image. And of course, if the sandwiches were placed to the left, then a higher proportion of time would be spent looking to the left of the image. Two things it's important to recognise. Firstly, at no point, of course, did the subject look at the sandwiches. There was nothing overt about it. The subjects thought they were doing the experiment completely as asked, and they didn't look longingly at this plate of sandwiches, drooling saliva. That's the first thing. And the second thing, which is more important really, is that the subjects didn't know they were doing it. It was completely unconscious. They didn't know they were favouring one half of the image over the other. They weren't aware of the sandwiches, or at least they didn't feel as if they were aware of the sandwiches in the room whilst they were doing the experiment. It was entirely non-conscious effect. And in fact, if they had been asked afterwards, or been told, you're favouring the left-hand side of the image, could you spend a bit more time looking to the right, or vice versa? And if the subject had tried to do that, it would have felt unnatural. It would have felt that they're kind of resisting this kind of visual gravity that's pulling them towards something they don't even know they're thinking about. I'm not sure exactly how that relates to the video I made earlier about the distracting effects of authority and boobs, but certainly there does seem to be non-conscious processes, as well as fully conscious processes going on, that draw, at least in that case, our visual attention away from where we think we are focusing. or where we're intending to be focusing, towards more possibly subsidiary elements of our experience, like our desires.